Billionaire mockingly asks Waitress for financial advice. Then she says something brilliant. The strangest thing about power, the old bartender once whispered to Claire Donovan, is that the people who have the most of it usually think they can recognize intelligence just by looking at someone. Rain streaked down the tall glass windows of Blackmore Steakhouse like silver threads melting across Manhattan. Inside, the restaurant glowed with soft amber light and the low hum of expensive conversations. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Jazz piano floated through the air like smoke. And near the center of the dining room, Ethan Blackwood sat surrounded by men worth more money than most countries would ever see. Claire balanced a tray against one shoulder as she moved carefully between tables, her black uniform perfectly pressed despite the 12-hour shift weighing on her feet. At 26, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible. Wealthy people liked invisible waitresses. They liked their water refilled before asking, their steaks medium rare without explanation, their silence protected. Claire understood all of it. She also understood something else. Rich men often confused silence with emptiness. Mississippi, Ethan's voice cut cleanly across the dining room. Calm, sharp, the kind of voice used to boardrooms falling quiet. Claire turned toward table 14. Four men in tailored suits looked up at her with casual boredom. One checked his Rolex. Another swirled a glass of bourbon that probably cost more than her weekly grocery bill. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair, studying her the way men studied stock charts and racehorses. Calculating value, calculating weakness. He slid the leather check holder across the white tablecloth toward her. "Convince me not to short the market," he said casually. "You have 30 seconds. The men around him laughed immediately. Not cruel laughter. Worse, effortless laughter. The kind that assumed the joke had already been won. Claire looked down at the folded receipt, then at the heavy gold watch resting beneath Ethan's cuff. Patek Philippe, perpetual calendar. Nearly $200,000. Old money trying to look understated. She noticed details automatically. She always had. "Sir?" she asked softly. Ethan smirked faintly. "Financial advice," he repeated. "I hear waitresses are full of opinions these days." Another ripple of amusement circled the table. Claire could feel nearby diners listening without pretending not to. The piano continued quietly somewhere behind her. Rain tapped softly against the windows. For a moment, she said nothing, and Ethan Blackwood mistook that silence for intimidation. It was a mistake powerful men made often. Claire set the water pitcher down carefully beside the candles. Her movements remained steady, unhurried. "If you're shorting now," she said quietly, "you're about 6 months too late." The laughter stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. One of the investors blinked. Another lowered his glass halfway to the table. Ethan's expression didn't change at first, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Claire continued before anyone could interrupt her. Commercial debt exposure already peaked last quarter. Smart money started rotating out weeks ago. The people still panicking now are retail investors and late-entry firms trying to look proactive for shareholders. Silence settled over the table like snowfall. Even the bartender looked up. Ethan stared at her carefully now. No amusement left. Only calculation. Claire reached for the leather holder again. "But then again," she added softly, "I'm just the waitress." For 3 full seconds, nobody at table 14 moved. The restaurant noise seemed to blur into something distant and underwater. Ethan Blackwood slowly leaned back in his chair, studying Claire with a level of attention that most people spent their entire lives trying to earn from men like him. One of the younger investors gave an awkward laugh, forcing confidence back into the silence. "That is actually not bad," he said. "Did you read that somewhere online?" Claire adjusted the candle slightly so it no longer flickered against the wine glasses. "No, sir," she answered calmly. "But if your fund is still betting against commercial recovery after the last shipping index correction, then your analysts are probably reacting emotionally instead of strategically." The investor's smile disappeared. Ethan said nothing. That was the unsettling part. Men like Ethan always spoke. They dominated rooms by instinct. But now he simply watched her. Quietly, carefully, as if trying to solve a puzzle he suddenly realized was more dangerous than it looked. Claire picked up the water pitcher again. "Would anyone like a refill?" she asked. Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the oldest man at the table cleared his throat. "What exactly do you think happens next?" Claire poured water into his glass without spilling a single drop. "The same thing that always happens," she said softly. "Fear creates hesitation. Hesitation creates opportunity. And the people pretending to panic are usually the ones already buying." The older investor blinked slowly. "That is..." He stopped himself. Ethan finally spoke. "Specific." Claire nodded once. "Markets usually are." Somewhere near the bar, a waiter dropped a fork. The sharp metallic sound snapped the room back into motion. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked again. But table 14 remained suspended in a different atmosphere entirely. Ethan rested one arm across the back of his chair. "What is your name?" "Claire Donovan." "Claire Donovan," he repeated carefully, as if testing whether the name belonged inside his world. "And where exactly does a Manhattan waitress learn to analyze debt cycles?" Claire offered the faintest smile. Not flirtatious, not nervous, simply unreadable. "Probably the same place billionaires learn to underestimate people." One of the investors nearly choked on his bourbon. Ethan's mouth twitched slightly. Not quite a smile. More like surprise trying not to become admiration. Claire reached into the pocket of her apron and placed the dinner receipt beside Ethan's plate. Her handwriting was elegant, precise, the kind developed before keyboards replaced notebooks. Ethan noticed immediately. He noticed details for a living. "You write like an attorney," he said. "Or a professor." "My father liked fountain pens," Claire replied quietly. Something shifted behind her eyes for only a second. A shadow passing over sunlight. Then it disappeared. Ethan noticed that too. "And what did your father do?" Claire hesitated very briefly. "He used to believe hard work mattered on Wall Street." The answer landed heavier than she intended. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Used to?" Claire looked toward the rain sliding down the windows of Blackmore Steakhouse. Manhattan glowed outside in blurred gold reflections and moving headlights. "People lose things in financial collapses," she said softly. "Sometimes money, sometimes reputations, sometimes much more than that." Silence returned again, smaller this time, more personal. Ethan slowly removed his watch and placed it beside the wine glass. The movement looked casual, but Claire understood what it really meant. Men like Ethan only removed expensive armor when they became genuinely interested. "Sit down for 1 minute," he said quietly. "I would like to ask you something." Claire looked at the empty chair beside him, then at the crowded dining room still waiting for her attention. "I am working, Mr. Blackwood." Ethan held her gaze evenly. "That was not a request I make often." Claire lifted the tray onto her shoulder again. "That is probably why people stop telling you the truth." And before anyone at the table could respond, she walked away beneath the soft amber lights, leaving for millionaires staring after a waitress who somehow made all of them feel smaller. Claire disappeared into the rhythm of the restaurant as if nothing unusual had happened. Orders, wine refills, quiet apologies near the kitchen when a steak arrived overcooked. The polished machinery of Blackmore Steakhouse kept moving around her, but Ethan Blackwood no longer saw any of it clearly. His attention followed the waitress with the calm voice and impossible answers. "You are staring," one of the investors muttered with amusement. Ethan ignored him. He was still thinking about the sentence she had spoken near the window. People lose things in financial collapses, sometimes much more than that. Most people talked about money emotionally, fearfully, greedily. Claire had spoken about it like someone describing weather after surviving a hurricane. Ethan picked up his bourbon slowly. "Run a background check," he said quietly to the man beside him. "Tonight." The investor blinked. "On the waitress? On Claire Donovan? You think she is bluffing?" Ethan swirled the amber liquid once before answering. No, that single word settled heavily over the table. Ethan had built Blackwood Capital by detecting patterns before anyone else could see them. He trusted instincts the way surgeons trusted steady hands. And every instinct he had was telling him the same thing. Claire Donovan was pretending to be smaller than she really was. Across the restaurant, Claire stepped into the narrow service hallway beside the kitchen and finally exhaled. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed faintly. She pressed both hands against the cold steel prep counter for one quiet second. Claire. She looked up. Maria, another waitress, stood near the ice machine holding 2 empty champagne flutes. What exactly did you say to table 14? Claire grabbed a folded towel beside the sink. Why? Because Mr. Blackwood has not looked at his phone in 15 minutes. Claire almost smiled at that. Almost. Maria lowered her voice. You know who he is, right? Of course Claire knew. Everyone in Manhattan knew Ethan Blackwood. Financial magazines called him the king of calculated risk. Business podcasts quoted him like scripture. 3 years earlier, one sentence from Ethan during a television interview had erased nearly $4 billion from an airline company overnight. Markets listened when he breathed. I know who he is, Claire answered quietly. Maria stared at her carefully now. Then why do you sound like you are not impressed? Claire folded the towel with precise movements. Because money is loud, she said softly. And I grew up around enough loud people to know it does not mean they are right. Before Maria could answer, the kitchen bell rang sharply. Claire picked up 2 plates and returned to the dining room. The jazz pianist had shifted into something slower now. Rain still streaked the windows, turning Manhattan into a blur of gold and silver outside. Ethan watched Claire move between tables with unsettling focus. She carried herself differently than other servers. No rushed energy, no nervous smile. Even balancing heavy trays, she moved with the quiet control of someone trained to think under pressure. Then he noticed it. During a brief pause near the bar, Claire pulled something from beneath a folded magazine beside the register. Just for a second, a newspaper page, Financial Times, folded inside a celebrity magazine like a hidden secret. Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. Claire realized too late that he had seen it. Their eyes met across the room. Neither looked away immediately. Most people broke eye contact with Ethan Blackwood within seconds. Claire did not. That disturbed him more than it should have. One of the investors leaned closer. You are enjoying this? Ethan rested his glass against the table. No, he said quietly. I am trying to figure out why a woman who understands market rotations better than half my analysts is carrying steak knives for a living. At that exact moment, Claire approached the table again with their entrees balanced carefully on one arm. Ethan watched her set each plate down flawlessly without checking the seating chart once. Ribeye, sea bass, truffle pasta, perfect memory, perfect composure. Then Claire placed Ethan's plate in front of him and spoke softly enough that only he could hear. You are asking the wrong question, Mr. Blackwood. Ethan looked up slowly. Claire met his eyes calmly beneath the warm restaurant lights. The real question is why someone like you did not notice sooner. The rest of the dinner passed under a strange kind of tension. Not hostile, not friendly either. Felt more dangerous than both. Ethan Blackwood barely touched his steak. That alone made the investors uneasy. Men like Ethan did not lose focus easily. Yet every few minutes, his attention drifted back toward Claire, moving beneath the warm chandelier light with quiet precision. Around 10:30, the crowd at Blackmore Steakhouse began thinning. Wealthy couples disappeared into rainy Manhattan nights beneath black umbrellas. Empty wine glasses vanished from tables. The jazz pianist packed away his sheet music slowly near the bar. Claire carried a tray of dessert plates toward the kitchen when Marcus Reed, Ethan's chief operations officer, stepped into her path. Mr. Blackwood would like a word, he said politely. Claire kept walking. I still have tables. Marcus lowered his voice. Most people rearrange their schedules when Ethan Blackwood asks for 5 minutes. Claire finally stopped near the service station. That is probably why he keeps expecting the world to move for him. Marcus blinked once, caught off guard by the answer. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You really are different." Claire said nothing. She simply adjusted the folded towel over her arm and walked toward table 14. Ethan remained seated alone now. The other investors had already left. Rain rolled softly down the tall windows behind him, turning the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold. His expensive coat rested across the empty chair beside him. His phone lay untouched on the table. Claire approached carefully. "Can I get you anything else tonight, Mr. Blackwood?" Ethan studied her for a long moment before answering. "Sit down." Claire glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. "I am still working." "Your shift ends in 12 minutes, Ethan replied calmly. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "You asked someone. I noticed things." She almost laughed at that. Almost. Slowly, Claire sat across from him, though her posture remained straight and cautious. Ethan rested his hands together near the candlelight. Up close, he looked less intimidating than before. Still powerful. Still controlled. But there was exhaustion around his eyes now. The kind hidden by expensive suits and perfect posture. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. Claire looked toward the rain outside. "That is a dramatic question for a Tuesday night. You speak like someone trained for boardrooms. And you speak like someone trained not to hear no." Ethan leaned back slightly. "Fair." Silence settled between them for a moment. Comfortable would have been the wrong word. Alert was closer, like two chess players pretending they were discussing the weather. Ethan finally spoke again. "Harvard." Claire's expression did not change, but something colder entered her eyes. "No, Wharton." "No, then where?" Claire reached for the untouched water glass in front of her. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "Why?" Ethan answered honestly this time. "Because I have spent 20 years building a company designed to identify talent before anyone else does." Claire looked at him carefully now. "And tonight," Ethan exhaled softly, "tonight I am realizing I may have missed something important." The honesty in his voice surprised even him. Claire noticed that too. For the first time all evening, her expression softened slightly. Only slightly. "My father taught economics at Columbia," she said quietly. "He used to pause movies halfway through and explain how every story was really about power." Ethan listened without interrupting. "He believed markets reflected human behavior," Claire continued. "Fear, ego, desperation, hope." Her fingers rested lightly against the glass. "He said if you understood people honestly, money became predictable." Ethan nodded slowly. "Smart man." Claire's eyes lowered briefly. "He was." The way she said those two words changed the atmosphere instantly. Ethan felt it. Grief rarely disappeared completely. He simply learned how to wear better clothing. Before he could respond, Claire's manager suddenly appeared near the table with visible panic on his face. "Claire," he whispered sharply. "What are you doing sitting down?" Claire stood immediately. "I was just helping the guest." The manager forced an anxious smile toward Ethan. "I apologize, sir. This is not our standard protocol." Ethan looked up slowly, calmly. "Actually," he said, "the only problem tonight would be interrupting the first intelligent conversation I have had all week." The manager laughed nervously, unsure whether Ethan Blackwood was joking. "Of course, sir," he said quickly. "We appreciate your business." Ethan did not look away from Claire. "I am sure you do." The manager nodded too many times before retreating toward the kitchen. Claire remained standing beside the table, one hand resting lightly against the back of the empty chair. "You did not have to embarrass him," she said quietly. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen doors swinging shut. "I was not embarrassing him. You were reminding everyone in the room that you could." Ethan considered that for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A real smile this time. Small. Tired. Honest enough to change his face completely. "You analyze people the same way you analyze markets." Claire picked up his empty bourbon glass. "People are easier," she answered softly. "Charts do not lie because they are afraid. Ethan watched her carry the glass toward the bar beneath the amber lights. The strange thing was not that she challenged him. Plenty of people challenged powerful men in public these days. Journalists did it for ratings. Rivals did it for headlines. But Claire did something rarer. She spoke to him as if his wealth was the least interesting thing about him. And Ethan realized he could not remember the last time someone had done that. Near closing time, the restaurant finally quieted into soft echoes and half-empty tables. Chairs were stacked slowly near the back. The pianist had already left. Outside, rain still covered Manhattan in silver reflections. Claire stood behind the register reviewing receipts while the night manager counted cash drawers nearby. Her black apron was dusted lightly with flour from the dessert station. A loose strand of blonde hair had fallen beside her cheek hours ago, but she had never stopped long enough to fix it. Ethan noticed details like that now. He should have left 30 minutes earlier. Instead, he remained seated near the window with untouched coffee growing cold beside him. Marcus Reed approached the table again, adjusting his coat. "The car is waiting downstairs." Ethan nodded absently. Marcus lowered his voice. "You are doing it again." "Doing what?" "Getting curious." Ethan finally looked up. Marcus had worked beside him for 11 years. Long enough to recognize the expression on Ethan's face. It appeared whenever Ethan encountered something he could not immediately control. "You think she is hiding something?" Marcus continued carefully. Ethan glanced toward Claire at the register. No, I think she is protecting something." That answer surprised even him. Across the room, Claire closed the register drawer and removed her apron slowly. The shift was finally over. Her shoulders lowered just slightly, revealing exhaustion she had hidden all evening beneath professionalism and calm posture. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn paperback book before slipping on her coat. Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly when he saw the title, Principles of Behavioral Economics, filled with handwritten notes along the margins. Marcus followed his gaze and blinked. That is not normal waitress reading material. Ethan stood slowly, buttoning his dark coat. Neither was her market analysis. Before Marcus could say another word, Ethan crossed the restaurant floor toward Claire. She looked up as he approached, though she did not appear surprised to see him. "Mr. Blackwood." "Claire." The room felt strangely quiet around them now. Just the hum of refrigerators behind the bar and rain against the windows. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and removed a business card. Thick black cardstock. Minimal lettering. The kind of card powerful people carried because introductions were usually unnecessary. He placed it gently on the counter between them. "Come see me tomorrow." Claire looked down at the card but did not touch it. "Why?" "Because I would like to know why someone with your mind is working double shifts instead of running a portfolio." Claire's expression remained unreadable. "And if I say no?" Ethan held her gaze steadily. "Then I will spend an uncomfortable amount of time wondering about you." For the first time that night, Claire laughed softly. Quiet enough that most people would have missed it. But Ethan noticed. He noticed everything now. Claire slid the business card back toward him with one finger. "That sounds like a you problem, Mr. Blackwood." Then she picked up her bag, stepped past him calmly, and disappeared into the rainy Manhattan night while one of the richest men in New York stood motionless beneath the chandelier light holding a business card nobody had ever refused before. The rain had slowed to a cold mist by the time Claire stepped out of Blackmore Steakhouse. Manhattan shimmered around her in reflections of headlights and neon signs bleeding across wet pavement. She pulled her coat tighter and began walking downtown instead of calling a cab. Walking gave her time to think. And tonight, her thoughts were louder than the city. Ethan Blackwood. The way he watched people. The way he listened after she challenged him. Most wealthy men became defensive when confronted. Ethan became curious. That made him more dangerous. Claire stopped briefly beneath the awning of a closed bookstore and glanced at the business card still sitting in her coat pocket. Somehow, after refusing it, she had still taken it when Ethan left it beside the register on his way out. Thick black cardstock. Minimal design. Just a name. Private number. Blackwood Capital. Simple things often belong to powerful people. She slid the card back into her pocket and kept walking. 20 blocks north, Ethan sat alone inside the back seat of his car, while Manhattan moved past the windows in streaks of silver and gold. Marcus Reed sat across from him, reviewing emails on a tablet. "You are unusually quiet," Marcus finally said. Ethan rested one hand against his jaw. "I keep replaying the conversation. Because she embarrassed a table full of investors?" "No," Ethan looked out at the city again. "Because she was not trying to." Marcus lowered the tablet slowly. "You really think she knows finance at that level?" Ethan gave him a look. "Marcus, she predicted our Singapore position exposure without seeing a single internal report." Silence followed that sentence. Even Marcus understood how impossible that sounded. Ethan leaned back against the leather seat. "Find out where she studied. Already working on it. And do it quietly." Marcus nodded once. "You think there is more?" Ethan almost answered immediately, then stopped. The strange thing was not Claire's intelligence. Wall Street was full of brilliant people. The strange thing was the restraint. Truly intelligent people usually wanted recognition, tension, influence. Claire Donovan hid from all three. That bothered him in ways he could not explain. Meanwhile, Claire climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment building on the Lower East Side, carrying a paper bag with leftover bread from the restaurant. The building smelled faintly of old radiators and laundry detergent. On the fourth floor, she unlocked apartment 4B and stepped quietly inside. A lamp glowed softly near the couch. Her younger brother Liam sat, surrounded by textbooks and medical paperwork, at the small kitchen table. "You are home late," he said gently. Claire dropped her keys into a ceramic bowl by the door. "Busy night." Liam studied her carefully over the rim of his glasses. "Something happened." Claire smiled faintly. "You always say that like you are interrogating a suspect. Occupational hazard." Liam gestured toward the anatomy textbooks spread across the table. "Future doctors observe patterns." Claire removed her coat slowly. "Then future doctors should stop leaving instant noodle cups everywhere." Liam laughed quietly before his expression softened again. "You look different tonight." Claire paused near the sink. "Different how?" "Like your brain has been awake for hours." She opened the refrigerator and placed the leftover bread inside. "I met someone." Liam immediately looked interested. Claire pointed a warning finger toward him. "Not like that." "So worse," Liam teased gently. "A man who challenges you intellectually." Claire shook her head, but she was still smiling slightly. "He is a billionaire hedge fund manager." Liam nearly dropped his pen. "What? Exactly?" She sat across from him finally, exhaustion settling into her shoulders now that the performance of the evening was over. Liam studied her face carefully. "And what did this billionaire want?" Claire thought about Ethan standing beneath the chandelier light holding out a business card nobody had ever refused before. "Answers," she said quietly. Liam leaned back in his chair. "Did you give him any?" Claire looked toward the rain sliding down the apartment window. Her voice softened almost into a whisper. "Not the ones he was really asking for." At 6:30 the next morning, Ethan Blackwood was already standing inside the glass conference room overlooking Midtown Manhattan. Blackwood Capital occupied the top 3 floors of a steel tower where silence itself felt expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected gray morning clouds rolling over the city, while analysts moved quickly between glowing screens outside the conference room walls. Ethan loosened his tie slightly as Marcus Reed entered carrying a thin black folder. "You were right," Marcus said carefully. Ethan looked up immediately. "About what?" Marcus placed the folder on the table. "Claire Donovan is hiding something." Ethan opened the folder slowly. Inside were fragments, incomplete records, academic competition results, scholarship mentions, financial journals. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he read. Claire Donovan, National Economics Invitational finalist at 19. Full academic scholarship to Columbia University. Published undergraduate research cited by investment firms before she turned 21. Then suddenly nothing. No graduate records. No finance career. No internships. Just a hard disappearance from every professional network nearly 4 years earlier. Ethan looked up sharply. That does not make sense. There is more. Marcus slid another paper across the table. A newspaper clipping. Small. Buried near the bottom corner of an old financial section. Ethan read silently. Senior Professor Daniel Donovan accused in insider trading investigation. Career destroyed after federal inquiry. University resignation follows market scandal. Ethan stared at the article for several seconds longer than necessary. Daniel Donovan, he said quietly. Her father. Marcus nodded once. The investigation collapsed later. Lack of evidence. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Meaning he was probably innocent. Probably. Marcus hesitated before continuing. But according to public records, he died 6 months after the accusations surfaced. Silence settled heavily inside the conference room. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan continued moving in its endless rhythm of money and ambition. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair. Suddenly Claire's words from the restaurant returned with painful clarity. People lose things in financial collapses. Sometimes much more than that. Ethan closed the folder carefully. Find out who handled the investigation. Marcus blinked. You think this matters now? Ethan looked toward the skyline outside. I think a woman does not abandon a mind like hers unless something taught her intelligence can become dangerous. Meanwhile, downtown, Claire sat beside Liam in the crowded waiting room of St. Vincent Medical Center. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through pale windows, while nurses moved quietly between patients carrying clipboards and coffee cups. Liam adjusted the sleeve of his sweater while pretending not to notice how exhausted Claire looked. You should sleep more, he muttered. Claire handed him a bottle of water. And you should stop giving medical advice before graduating. Liam smiled faintly, then studied her face again. You are thinking about him. Claire stared at the television mounted silently in the corner of the waiting room. Financial news scrolled beneath stock updates and market predictions. Ethan Blackwood's face suddenly appeared on the screen during a business segment. Calm, controlled, untouchable. I am thinking about mistakes, she answered quietly. Liam followed her gaze toward the television. He seems important. Claire almost laughed at the understatement. Men like him shape economies with one sentence. And yet you still argued with him. Claire looked down at her hands folded together. That was the problem. Before Liam could ask what she meant, Claire's phone vibrated softly inside her coat pocket. Unknown number. Manhattan area code. Claire already knew who it was before answering. She stepped away from the waiting room toward the long hospital corridor lined with pale blue walls. Hello. For a second, only silence answered her. Then Ethan's voice came through calm and low. Your father was Daniel Donovan. Claire stopped walking immediately. The fluorescent lights above her suddenly felt colder. You investigated me. You intrigued me. Claire closed her eyes briefly. That is not better. Ethan exhaled softly on the other end of the line. Your father was cleared after the investigation collapsed. Too late for it to matter. Silence again. Heavy this time. Personal. Ethan finally spoke more quietly than before. Claire. I think someone destroyed his career intentionally. Her grip tightened around the phone. You do not know anything about my father. Then tell me. Claire looked through the hospital window beside her, where rain clouds still hung low over Manhattan like unfinished grief. When she finally answered, her voice barely rose above a whisper. People like you were the reason he died. The line stayed silent for several seconds after Claire spoke. Not because Ethan had nothing to say. Because for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwood realized someone was speaking to him without fear. Outside the conference room windows at Blackwood Capitol, clouds drifted slowly above Manhattan like dark ships crossing glass towers. Ethan stood motionless beside his desk, phone pressed quietly against his ear. Claire, he said finally, I was not involved in what happened to your father. No, she answered softly from the hospital corridor. Men like you never are. Not directly. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The sentence landed harder than any accusation shouted in anger, because it sounded practiced, like something she had been carrying alone for years. In the background, he could hear distant hospital announcements echoing softly through speakers. Footsteps, a rolling cart, life continuing while old grief reopened itself between two strangers. "Your father was cleared," Ethan said carefully. "After his reputation was destroyed," Claire replied. "After universities stopped calling. After reporters parked outside our apartment. After people who used to shake his hand stopped looking him in the eye." Her voice never rose. That made every word heavier. "Do you know what humiliation does to proud people, Mr. Blackwood?" Ethan looked down at the folder still open on the conference table. Daniel Donovan smiling beside students in an old university photograph. Bright eyes, intelligent posture, the kind of man who probably believed truth eventually mattered. "I think your father was targeted," Ethan said quietly. "And I think whoever did it benefited financially." Claire almost laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. "Of course they did. Everything becomes profit to people like Wall Street." Ethan rested one hand against the window overlooking the city below. "Not everything. That is easy to say from the top floor of a skyscraper." Silence again. Then Claire spoke more softly than before. "You know what the worst part was?" Ethan listened carefully. "My father kept believing someone would eventually apologize." The sentence hollowed the air between them. Ethan looked out across Manhattan where thousands of windows reflected gray morning light like mirrors. He had spent half his life building wealth powerful enough to influence markets, politicians, entire industries. Yet standing there now, he understood something uncomfortable. Money could accelerate almost anything except human decency. "Claire," he said carefully, "meet me tonight." "No," the answer came immediately. "Just listen. That was my father's mistake too." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You think I am your enemy because of what I represent. You represent a system that destroys people quietly." Ethan almost argued, then stopped himself, because deep down he knew she was not entirely wrong. Across the hospital corridor, Claire leaned against the window beside the elevators. Below her, ambulances moved through wet streets while strangers rushed beneath umbrellas. Liam was still waiting inside for test results neither of them could afford to fear. "You know the strange thing?" she said quietly. "My father used to admire investors." Ethan listened silently. "He said finance could change lives when intelligent people used it ethically." Her voice trembled slightly for the first time. "Just once. Then intelligent people destroyed his." Ethan looked back toward the newspaper clipping inside the folder. Tiny headline, tiny corner of a page. One man's entire collapse reduced to 6 printed sentences between advertisements and stock updates. "Claire," he said slowly, "if someone framed your father, I can find out who." She closed her eyes. "Why?" Ethan answered honestly. "Because I do not think you stopped believing in intelligence." Silence. Then softer now, almost tired, Claire finally whispered, "No." Ethan waited. "I stopped believing intelligence protects anyone." The call ended quietly after that. No goodbye, no anger, just silence returning like rain against glass. Ethan lowered the phone slowly while Marcus Reed watched from the conference room doorway. "That bad?" Marcus asked carefully. Ethan stared out at Manhattan for a long moment before answering. No, his reflection looked unfamiliar in the window now. Less certain, more human. That honest. 3 nights later, Claire returned to Blackmore Steakhouse expecting the same polished routine. Candlelight, expensive watches, quiet arrogance floating through the dining room like perfume. Instead, she walked into something unusual. Silence. Not complete silence, but the kind that gathers when people are waiting for something important to happen. Claire slowed near the hostess stand. "What happened?" she whispered to Maria. Maria's eyes widened immediately. "You seriously do not know?" Claire frowned slightly. "Know what?" Maria pointed toward the center of the dining room. Ethan Blackwood sat alone at table 14 beneath the chandelier lights. No investors, no assistants, no phone in his hand. Just a single cup of black coffee untouched beside the window while rain traced silver lines across Manhattan outside. Claire felt her stomach tighten unexpectedly. "He has been here for an hour," Maria whispered, "and he refused 3 different servers." Claire looked back toward Ethan. He was wearing a dark charcoal coat instead of a suit tonight. Simpler, less armor. Yet somehow he still carried the same gravity that made entire rooms rearrange themselves around him. Ethan looked up slowly as if he had sensed her before seeing her. Their eyes met across the restaurant again. Calm, direct, familiar now in a way neither of them fully understood. Claire approached carefully. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood." Ethan gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "Claire." She remained standing. "You are refusing service now?" A faint smile touched his face. "Only from people who are not honest with me." Claire folded her hands lightly in front of her apron. "That sounds exhausting." Ethan looked out the rain-covered windows briefly before answering. "It is." Something about the way he said it made him seem older suddenly. Not physically, spiritually, like a man who had spent too many years winning rooms and too few years understanding them. Claire finally sat down slowly across from him. "You should not be here." "Probably not." Ethan slid a thin manila folder across the table toward her. Claire did not touch it immediately. "What is this?" "Everything I could find about your father's case." Her expression changed almost invisibly, a tightening around the eyes. Ethan noticed because he noticed everything about her now. The investigation against Daniel Donovan was triggered 48 hours before a hedge fund made nearly $600 million betting against companies connected to his research. Claire stared at the folder silently. The timing was too perfect. Ethan continued quietly. "Someone wanted panic." Slowly, Claire opened the folder. Newspaper clippings, financial timelines, internal trading records. Her father's photograph smiling beside university students years before scandal hollowed him out. Ethan watched her carefully while she turned each page. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Ethan answered immediately this time. "Because I think your father deserved better." Claire lowered the papers slowly. "You did not even know him." "No," Ethan's voice remained calm. "But I know what happens when powerful people stop seeing human beings and start seeing opportunities instead." The sentence lingered heavily between them. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Not as a billionaire now. Not as a symbol of Wall Street. Just a man sitting quietly beneath warm restaurant lights trying, perhaps for the first time in years, to say something truthful without turning it into a transaction. "You really think someone framed him?" she whispered. Ethan nodded once. "And I think your father got destroyed because he refused to play the same games everyone else did." Claire's eyes dropped toward the old photograph again. Her father smiling beside a chalkboard filled with equations. She remembered those nights. Coffee cups, fountain pens, lectures about ethics and markets and human behavior. She remembered him saying intelligence meant nothing without character. Outside, thunder rolled softly above Manhattan. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. "Claire." She looked up. His expression was quieter now, less controlled. "You said people like me caused your father's death." Claire held his gaze steadily. "Yes." Ethan nodded slowly as if accepting the weight of it. "Then maybe people like me should finally start fixing what we broke." Claire stared at him across the candlelight while rain slid endlessly down the windows beside them. And for the first time since Daniel Donovan died, something unfamiliar moved quietly through the grief she had carried for years. Not trust, not forgiveness, something smaller, more fragile. The possibility that one honest person inside a broken system could still matter.